Hello and welcome to our online learning module critique. My name is Random Mavronin, and I will be speaking on behalf of Emily, Sean, Christiana, and Michael. As a group, we decided to test out the learning module of Blackboard. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Our agenda for today. So, we're going to be looking at what is Blackboard and the principles of e-learning, affordances and constraints, a video tour of Blackboard, possible improvements that we thought Blackboard could use, influences on the teaching and the learning process, the best demographic to use this online learning module with, and finishing off with our references. So, what is Blackboard? We have a video to show you guys. Some of the features include an organized list of courses. Each course has a course overview. Blackboard allows participation in teacher participation in discussion with students. You can also send announcements and reminders, and ability to grade assessments and showcase those grades individually to students via the learning medium, online learning medium.
So this is just a quick overview of the various features that Blackboard has. So for example, there is a list of courses. So right here you can see all of the courses that I'm currently in. And if I click on a various course, they all will look slightly different, but for the most part they're all very similar. This is just the home page. I click on content. I'll be able to find various things I need to do for my course. For example, there's the course outline right here, which overviews everything I need to do for the course. Also, there are discussions posts that you can do. So for here, we have 2 discussion posts where we can discuss with people in our class about the class and various topics we are supposed to talk about. We also can, in this group section here, make groups for ourselves if we would like to have our own personal groups. Also, if we would like to personally message the prof or anyone else, you can go through here, create a message. That way no one else can see it other than the person you send it to. It's also an announcement section, which right now I don't have any announcements, but this little timer here is the updates. Also, there's grades. If I click here, I can go to my grades for all my classes, or if I want to search each individual class, I can click on my grades right here. So these are just a quick few features of Blackboard.
Moving on, we will be exploring the principles of e-learning and how they relate to Blackboard.
Hello everyone. As a quick introduction to our presentation here today, I'm going to go over the principles of e-learning and how and where they can be found in Blackboard before we go into more detail. So firstly, we talk about our 7 principles being multimedia, contiguity, modality, redundancy, coherence, personalization, and finally our segmentation. So we look at multimedia first. Blackboard has a variety of opportunities to embed multimedia into the system. There can be easy sharing of blogs, images, videos, readings, and links. Just about anything instructors want to include there. Some things that we've seen used before are lots of discussions, group blog or blog posts, and then file exchanges for image, videos, and articles. So lots of opportunity for multimedia there. Secondly, looking at contiguity, the contiguity of Blackboard is really dependent on how individual instructors choose to use it. What I mean by that is some will group lessons together, others will group by the week that's happening, and there's some that won't group at all. So it's very dependent on how they choose to, and we'll go through some of the good and the bad of Blackboard's organization later. Next, looking at modality, it's largely absent on Blackboard unless they're embedded separately by those instructors through videos. Blackboard's very text-based. It doesn't use narration very often. Next, looking at the redundancy. Again, going back to if it's very, very text-based, you don't see much redundancy of content, but you aren't seeing narration instead of text. You're just seeing lots and lots of text. Next, looking at that coherence. When it's used to its full potential, Blackboard can be very, very coherent with little cognitive overload, little overlap, and very easy to follow and find what you need to. because it has the ability to put clear tabs for content, organize it as you wish to, and then instructors can release content to students as needed in order to not overwhelm. But again, it's very dependent on how it's chosen to be used. Next, looking at personalization, it's a very highly formal learning management system, and it's often used by post-secondary institutions. So that in that design, it kind of has this one-size-fits-all design for an online classroom, which means it can feel very impersonal at times. With that said, I have seen there is a toolbar where you can go in and kind of personalize it to fit you, and I know that instructors can go in and add images, change color schemes, add like video instructions, and make it a little bit more comfortable and personalized if they choose to. Finally, looking at that segmenting, it can be as segmented as instructors really want it to be, which is a kind of a theme here with Blackboard, but it can be designed to supply all the content at once if that's the nature of the course, or it can be gradually released as instructors choose to do so. And you'll see examples of both of those kind of methods in our tours of Blackboard later. So kind of to conclude that and sum everything up, Blackboard is highly adaptable, which is kind of a great tool. So it can be adapted to suit the needs of individual courses and instructors. It can be a really great online learning environment if it's done well, or it can really be lacking in many areas if instructors don't put the time into it. You'll get to see much more of Blackboard through the rest of our critique. Thanks for listening.
All right, now let's discuss some affordances. So essentially what affordances are, some people might not know the definition. Affordances refer to what the uses of a certain object, or in this case an online module, are. So essentially, what can you do? What are all the possibilities that this online module affords you to do with it? So some of the things that we were looking at or that we discussed was that essentially Blackboard is a site that holds all of the students' classrooms. We also took some principle of mobile learning and applied them to affordances. So or study discusses how mobile learning principles, or what the importance of mobile learning principles are. For example, sorry, not the importance, but what the benefits of mobile learning is. So, you know, things like discussion board to share ideas with fellow students, collaborative learning, messaging center to send messages to students and teacher, accessibility features, as well as in places like in developing countries where students might not have access to laptops, they do have access to smartphones. So a smartphone can help, you know, be a gateway to use technology such as Blackboard. And because Blackboard can be used on a mobile phone, these affordances also apply to this online module. Moving on, Scotland and Pink did a study, or kind of a pilot, with Blackboard in 2002. This was done in a languages course, and then at the end of the course they got feedback on the student experience with Blackboard, to see if this was something that they whether they had difficulty using it or not, whether it was feasible for them to use this module in the future. And so these were some of the results. 64% of students said that Blackboard was a valuable part of their language course. 20% were neutral, while only 60% had a negative experience. 60% said that Blackboard was useful to support materials covered during tutorials, and 80% said that they felt comfortable using Blackboard. So based on these results, you know, it's evident that students are not only comfortable with the layout of Blackboard, and as it's very user and student friendly, but they also found it critical in their success, because it gave teachers the ability to provide students with materials and resources via this online learning module, which they could use to better assist them in the learning process. Another part, which I'll go into a little bit further, another benefit that was discussed in the study was that this particular university in which they conducted the study at, they wanted to increase student autonomy, because learning is not only done in the classroom, but it's done on the student's own time outside of the classroom. They essentially reduced class time from 3 hours to 2 hours, and they introduced this Blackboard, this online learning module, Blackboard. But by providing students with resources and assignments and tasks via Blackboard, they were able to increase the amount of time students spent, learning on their own, and therefore augmenting that student autonomy. So constraints. Some of the constraints were size and limitations of. So, for example, if you're using this on your mobile device, the size and limitations of the mobile device being used, connection issues, and you also can't access messages on your mobile phone if you were to use this via mobile. If you were to use it via laptop, then perhaps things like not being able to access messages would not be a constraint, but definitely there would be things like connection issues and lack of internet access. So without further ado, we're going to go through an in-depth video tour of Blackboard.
Hi everyone. So at this point you have been introduced to Blackboard and how it fits in the principles of e-learning. You've also been introduced to some of the affordances and constraints of this tool. So what I'm going to do is just go over the principles of e-learning, some of the affordances and constraints using Blackboard. So I'll expand on some of our previous points and give you kind of a visual as to what we were referring to. So as Radu mentioned, in terms of what Blackboard offers its users, it does have one platform that we use for all of the courses. So as you can see here, my courses are over to the right, kind of as Sean had showed you earlier. So again, using one whole website to access all of my courses every semester. Again, as we previously mentioned, Blackboard also offers tools for collaborative learning. So again, another great thing. So we have a discussion board here, we have a blog, and those are just a few of the tools that Blackboard does offer in order to facilitate a more collaborative environment. There is also, if we just scroll up here and I click, a few other great things that Blackboard offers. So I can have my homepage obviously there, posts, updates from some of my professors, my gradebook, and calendar to look at deadlines there. There's also, if I go in, there is a message center, and those messages will also come up in the announcements area. Or if I go directly to one of my courses, for example, this course here, I can go to my messages, and these are messages either directly with the prof or directly with the student, which is a great way of keeping in touch with professors if this were to be a strictly online environment. The last great thing I want to show in terms of the affordances we discussed earlier is the interactive features provided by Blackboard. So they do have a lot of accessibility features that they provide. Some of them are interactive, like I said, interactive tools, and some of them are a little more simple. So if I scroll up to the top here, I am in student accessibility. So they offer some accessibility options if you are the professor and you would like to make your course a little more accessible, or if you're a student and you're looking for these accessibility features just for yourself. So I'm in the student one, like I said, and if I scroll down, they go through different accessibility features they offer. So keyboard navigation is one. They also have screen readers, and they use the screen readers dependent on the device you're using. So in my case, it'd be the VoiceOver on Mac if I chose to use that. Profs also have the option to use a screen reader for their course. And then they have quick links just to help students understand better how to use these tools. And here are the interactive tools I discussed earlier. And again, the accessibility training. So we want to make sure that students are able to learn how to use these tools efficiently to enhance their learning. In terms of the constraints that Reggie refers to, we did mention limitations to the mobile use and connection issues. So obviously this is an online platform, so that can be an issue. And lastly, it relies on student motivation. So as Radu mentions, students are responsible for logging on and using this platform and really getting all of its benefits. And without that motivation piece, they won't be able to access those benefits. It is also important to note that most of these affordances and constraints can be enhanced or mitigated based on the instructor facilitating the course. So as I begin to look at the principles of e-learning directly in Blackboard, that's something to keep in mind. The first principle of e-learning I want to take a look at directly on Blackboard is the multimedia principle. And Emily discussed this earlier, but it does include different multimedia platforms and technologies in order to enhance student learning as opposed to just using graphics. So some things that you can see off to the side here, you have a group blog, you have a group discussion board, you can do a file exchange, and those are just some tools that we can use to assist in our learning. For example, multimedia and the use of it on Blackboard is the use of embedded PowerPoints, embedded links, and again, internet resources used for video and talking and other, other uses as opposed to just text. This principle of e-learning I'd like to look at is the contiguity principle. So this is where we want to see associated things in close proximity to one another. If we're looking in terms of this course here, we can see that there are different tabs here, and when I click, I can see that if I go into the syllabus, I have my course syllabus. If I go into assignments and rubrics, I can see those things there. So this is a great example of everything I need, where it needs to be in order to help ease the learning process and facilitate that better. So again, Module 1, I have my reading and my slides. So things that are associated with one another are in the same spot to kind of ease the process. Now this is a good example of this principle of e-learning. Every professor does have the option to organize Blackboard in a way that they choose, so some may not organize in this fashion, which you might find does not adhere to this principle of learning. So this is a good example as opposed to a bad one. The next two principles of e-learning I'm going to talk about together. So the modality principle is the deeper learning when graphics are explained by on-screen narration. And the redundancy principle is when we explain with audio or text, but not both. So we don't want redundancy in our learning. And in terms of Blackboard, that is solely dependent on the instructor. So instructors can choose to have on-screen narration if they would like to present their content in that way. And again, redundancy would also be dependent if they chose to have text and audio presented at the same time. So this is one of the ways that Blackboard is very dependent on the instructor in terms of if they are adhering to these principles or not. Typically speaking, I have seen a lot of text as opposed to audio in my own experiences with Blackboard. And it would benefit student understanding if we had some information displayed via audio, because that would allow some content to be transferred via the verbal channel and would prevent overload from solely visual content. In terms of the coherence principle, we want to avoid unnecessary content from being used on Blackboard. So the best way to do that is these tabs of organization. So again, this is a good example of the coherence principle on Blackboard, because we have these nice folders we have for organization, and if we were to click on one, we can see that everything we need is in there. The other thing that makes this nice for avoiding unnecessary content is we only have the weeks that are needed up till this point. So we're not overwhelming students. We're only providing what is necessary up to the current point in time. Now, some students may find this a benefit, not to overwhelm them. Other students may find that they like getting their work up front in order to work ahead. But this would adhere to this principle in terms of only what is necessary is being provided. In terms of personalization on Blackboard, it is a very formal environment, which sometimes can lend itself to be a little more impersonal. There are some ways to improve this on Blackboard. Again, it can be very dependent on the instructor. So one way to do that is the announcements page. Some professors can make announcements as often as they choose, weekly, daily, to make it a little more personal. Course messages again, so those will go out to a whole class or individually if they like to make it a little more personal. Another thing that Blackboard offers is the customization of the courses. So if you want to make your course stand out, like they say, you can look at some of the properties, styles, tools, languages available to you, and that can make it a little more personal for each course, as opposed to having 5 courses that are a little more similar and maybe don't stand out. A good way to make it a little more personal is to include a welcome homepage with maybe some graphics introducing yourself to the students. The last principle of e-learning I want to look at on Blackboard is the segmenting principle. So again, we want to be breaking content into chunks in order to reduce the overall complexity of this resource. And I think that is one thing that Blackboard does really well. Again, this is dependent on the instructor and how they choose to organize their course, but if done well, Blackboard does provide a very easy way to adhere to this principle. So if we look at this example here, we have different headings that I can go into. If I were to click on the Learning Hub, I have again more chunking of folders that I can click on. If I go into Module 1, I have everything I need in order to complete Module 1. So this is a very easy way to reduce the complexity of students' learning by chunking. Hopefully now you have a better sense of some of the affordances and constraints directly on Blackboard, as well as how it adheres to the principles of e-learning.
Okay, well, thank you, Christiana, for that tour. Moving on. So, some of the possible improvements that we thought we could make to Blackboard, to optimize the student experience. We talked about having a way to lock the usage of other materials, for example, Facebook and YouTube. When students are trying to focus on one thing and they keep having repeated notifications from other programs, it could be distracting. Another thing, we could get in a partnership with public libraries to host students with devices and internet in case students are struggling with connections. Also focusing on community building as well, though it is an online learning module. The development of a community can increase motivation. So influences on the teaching and learning process. So influences on teaching. I thought that Blackboard allows teachers to share online resources with students via the content sections. So one of the things that's, then the first, so this point and the third point kind of go hand in hand, which, Blackboard has high organizational advantages. Content does not get lost or misplaced. So one of the advantages in this situation would be, for example, in a typical high school or secondary school, when you're trying to hand out, materials or content to students, doing it digitally allows you to share more content with your students. You don't want to burden your students with a stack of papers. B, some of these, especially based on my experiences in high school, is that you'll have a handful of students that lose or misplace or forget to bring course materials to every classroom. Well, Blackboard eliminates all of that. So it allows you, as a teacher, not only does it allow you to share online resources with students and give them recommended readings and such and content, but those are always going to be stored in one place. Excuse me. Those are always going to be stored in one place. So students will not be misplacing them, especially students that struggle with organizational, struggle with organization. So I think that's a really, really powerful and impactful benefit that Blackboard has, because every single class when student comes, all their content's going to be right there. So you're not left scrambling for, oh, did I have an extra handout, or does so-and-so have their sheet from yesterday that we were working on, right? Another benefit is that assignments can be handed in digitally. This helps students and teachers, and essentially it helps them by mainstreaming by streamlining the process of handing in assignments and handing assignments or grades back to students. It makes it really, really easy. And another thing is that teacher and student communication is optimized by having the ability to send personalized messages to the teacher via Blackboard. This type of communication can occur, even during school off hours, or some teachers even respond to messages on the weekends. So for students, if they have a question, it'll be easier to contact their teacher. So the influence on the learning process. So it provides students with support such as additional resources. And this one can't really be understated. It enhances student autonomy in the learning process. If you want to ensure that students are learning and continuing to learn away from school, or during school off hours, Blackboard is a great way of not only providing all the content that the students need, but it's all there in the same place. So since homework isn't being left at the school or lost or misplaced, it's easier to access it. Students are now able to take more control of their learning and are able to do it at their own pace during their own time. Furthermore, Blackboard allows for collaboration via group blogs, discussions, and sharing content. It makes it really easy for teachers to hand out group projects or collaborative projects, because students don't need to be in the physical space together. Via Blackboard, via this learning module, they're able to post group discussions or group blogs. So you're able to have student communication, which you could use an assessment. B, you can make sure that students are staying on task so that students aren't falling behind, or that certain, or you can ensure that all students in a group are pulling their weight, so that it's not one person completing the group project. Lastly, it could also be used to create professional learning groups. Obviously, this would be at a later stage in secondary school, such as grade 11 and grade 12, when students have a little bit more knowledge and expertise in various subjects, or interests in various subjects, and their knowledge base is a little greater, so they have something to offer to each other. Best demographics. So the best demographic would be post-secondary students, post-secondary education students, and senior secondary students, like grade 11s or 12. But essentially, you could do this with everyone in post-secondary education, even the lower grades like grade 9 and grade 10. One of the studies that we were looking at actually deployed this program via elementary students. So, I wouldn't go as low as grade 5 or 6, because I'm not sure of the success of this online learning module. There is a lot of depth and a lot of layers to it, and students need to be somewhat technologically savvy to be able to use this. But I also think that at the post-secondary level, not only at post-secondary, but at the secondary level, you can get a great use out of this program. So yeah, this concludes our presentation. These are our references. I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you for your time.